Okay, good morning. I'm Steve Rosansky, President and CEO of the Newport Beach Chamber of Commerce. Welcome to our July edition of Wake Up Newport. We've got a great program for you today, a great speaker. Unfortunately, I'm obviously not Alberto Sandoval. He couldn't make it this morning. I think he's doing something recreational. I'll just leave it at that. But I'm happy to sub in for him and introduce our speaker in a minute. But before we get to that, there's a few dignitaries with us in the audience this morning that I want to introduce, so if you'll bear with me. First off is City Councilwoman Robin Grant. With us from the Irvine Ranch Water District, Pier Swan, back there, enjoying a donut. We got a whole slew of commission members here, so I'm going to go through them. We have Howard Herzog and Brian Moore from the Civil Service Board. Welcome this morning. John Langford with the Planning Commission. There we go, John. John's also the head of, he's still the head of FONBUS, the chair of the Friends of Newport Beach Animal Shelter. They just donated a over $3 million facility to the city, turnkey animal shelter, not $1 paid for by the city. It's brand new. We just dedicated about 4 weeks ago. So thank you for that. Councilwoman Grant was involved with that too. They're both on the same board. Nancy Scarborough with the Finance Committee, right? Rumor has it that Nancy's the city council candidate in the 2024 election. Is that true, Nancy? Okay. Don't be bad. I mean, you either are, you're in or you're out. Come on. I have outed her here. I've been prodding her that she needs to, tell people. But so this is your coming out party. Paul Watkins of the Board of Library Trustees. He's the chair of the board. He's still fighting hard for that library lecture hall that we're going to move Wake Up Newport into in about 2 or 3 years. Uh-oh, you lost a grape there. The guy can sail around the world, but he can't hang on to his grapes. Also with us, I have a past chair and a chair. A past chair of the Chamber Board of Directors, Chris Delves. He just finished, did he leave back there? And he just handed over the gavel to Andy Smith over here, who's our current chair of our board. Welcome, Andy. And last but not least, we have a special guest. He's a friend of the chief, and he's a friend of mine. David Haithcock, he's the Steve Rosansky over at the Costa Mesa Chamber of Commerce. He's the president and CEO, or you got both titles? They gave you both? I hope they're paying you more. Okay. Costa Mesa Chamber of Commerce, we do a lot of things with them. So hopefully I got everybody. If I didn't, everybody's important here, obviously. So thank you all for coming. I'm going to introduce the chief as usual. I rely on Alberto to get the bio and all that, so I don't have it. But I have known this man most of his professional career here in town. Literally, when I started on city council in 2003, Jeff Boyles, or Chief Boyles as we call him now, was one of the first people who came up to me and said, "You need to know about this." And we have had a very good friendship for the last 20 years, so I'm glad that he's here again this morning to speak to us. He did become the chief in 2019. He's had virtually every position in the department, moving up the ranks, so we don't need to go into that. Obviously, very well qualified, does a great job. We have a great fire department, and he's going to tell you a little bit about some of the things they've been working on. He brought a whole crew of other guys here to answer questions that I'm sure he can answer, but probably get a more detailed answer from them because they'll be the experts in those areas. So thank you for coming, Chief Boyles, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Steve said that he didn't have his bio for me, so I figured, well, you could probably just make something up, and it seems like he did. Wow, we have a full room. I wasn't sure if anybody would actually show up to see the fire chief because a couple months ago it was Todd Spitzer, then Katie Porter, then Katrina Foley. So I was looking at the lineup of who's coming up, and I thought, who's going to come see the fire chief? So I brought my friend Dave, and Dave just became the president CEO of the chamber over in Costa Mesa. And when he was taking that test, I said, I think you can get this. Like, you're bald, and you talk a lot, and you're funnier than Steve Rosansky, so you can pull this off. So there you have it. Welcome, Dave. And then I brought a lot of my command staff as well for any of the technical questions that I may or may not be able to answer. My goal here today when I put this program together, and I'm looking around the crowd from the Speak Up Newport folks that I serve on the board with, or the Marines Foundation, Leadership Tomorrow with Andy Smith over there. You guys know a lot about me already as a person and as the chief, and you know a lot about our fire service and what the fire service in general does. But what I tried to do is put together what I think are some interesting components that we're working through together in the community and in the fire service right now. And I'm really excited. I figured out that this does have a little red pointer. So whenever I do that, take a look at what I'm doing. So today is July 6th. I'm going to point out really quick that this is the city proclaimed Ben Carlson Day today. So today is the 9-year anniversary of the passing of Ben Carlson. We're going to have several events today, one at 9 a.m., another one, I should say, at 1 p.m. down at the Junior Lifeguard headquarters, where we have speakers go talk to the kids, and then we do a remembrance down on the sand at 17th Street about 5:15 this afternoon, which is when he went missing. So those are just some of the events that we do here in town, but I would be remiss if I looked at that date and didn't point that out. So I would also like to out my city manager, who just walked in the back there, Grace Leung. So I know that Steve would have said a shout out to her as well as a dignitary. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started, and I'm going to try and accomplish a couple of things here. I'll just start with a real brief overview of our organizational chart here in Newport Beach with the fire department. You know that we have lifeguards. So over on, let's do this, your far left on the red is what we call fire operations, and those are all the fire stations, all the safety personnel that go on fire engines, ladder trucks, paramedic ambulances. Chief Justin Carr is standing in the back right there. He's the tall fellow with the tie on. He's the assistant chief in charge of all those folks. Kristen Thompson is our division chief. She's over here. She's one of the first division chief, first EMS division chiefs in the state of California, and as far as I know, the only female. And she was appointed by Governor Newsom a couple of years ago to serve on the state EMS commission board. So not only does the fire service have a representative from Kristen, but obviously Orange County and Newport Beach as well. So we're really proud of that. Raymond Reyes, I don't think Raymond's here, but he does our administrative, all of our contract, our ordering, our procurement, all of our fire engines, all of our payroll, all of our administration. The budget's pretty robust, about $64 million. Overall, we have about 155 full-time personnel and another couple hundred seasonal lifeguards for about 350 total people at any given time during the summer. So there's a big job there that Raymond's trying to manage and corral from different payrolls and different pay scales and different MOUs that he works through. The yellow right here, and I'm going to go real fast because I consider this the quote-unquote boring part, and then we'll get into the fun stuff. But this yellow part, no offense, James, you're not boring, is fire prevention. And I don't know if any of you came to our badge pinning. He gave the best speech I think I've ever seen. So he said that fire prevention used to be the sort of the boring part of the fire service for the dead and dying, he said, but he said now every day is the Super Bowl. So he takes it very serious. He works with all the developers, all the new construction projects, all the permitting. If you're doing anything from when the VEA was doing their major remodel all the way to a home remodel, him and his fire prevention team, they were out there on 4th of July for all the fireworks shows to make sure that those things go off without a hitch. There are a lot of things that they work on to keep everyone in the community safe, but also firefighters safe. And then over here, I think we're going to call this blue because it's water. That is Chief Brian O'Rourke, who is also right here. He's our assistant chief in charge of lifeguards. We call him the lifeguard chief because when we say assistant chief of lifeguards, it implies that he's the number 2. He's the number 1 over there, takes care of the junior lifeguard program and all the seasonal lifeguards and all of the full-time lifeguards, which we have 15 full-time lifeguards and, like I mentioned, about 200 seasonals. I'll get into the junior lifeguard program in a second here, by the way, too. So that's a brief overview of our organizational chart. A couple of things that we have also been working on that I'm just going to start off with is this annual report, and there are some in the back that Debbie, my assistant, there's Debbie right there. She brought some in the back if anybody's interested. Where'd Nancy go? Nancy and Charles, why don't you grab one of these on your way out, because I know it has some numbers in there that you might be interested in. We did that. That was born out of post-COVID, when we had been doing a lot of different things from testing and vaccination clinics and the pods, and you remember those days. We were trying to find a way to capture it and memorialize it. So we did our first annual report last year. We captured 2020 and 21, and then we just published this one last month, and it captures 2022. I promise next year it'll be about half the size, because I promised the year before it would be half the size, but we like pictures. Firefighters like pictures, not just where'd Deborah go that I just met this morning. So I was, I'm gonna digress here, but my program was to kind of debunk the myth that all we do is go grocery shopping all day long. So we grocery shop and then work out and then pet the dog. So there are other things that we're doing. So hopefully when you walk out of here today, you're well aware of some of the other things that we're doing. We completed our strategic plan. It's the first one that I'm aware of that this department has ever done. We've been around for 111 years now, or 112, 1911. So 112 years. So what we did here was roughly a 3 to 4 year plan. Things are just moving so quickly. It's tough to plan more than 3 years out, and how you think the fire service will look like, what the communities will look like, what the needs of society will look like. But these pretty robust document here that we put 18 people in a room together for 3 days and work through a lot of our goals, our strengths and our weaknesses, and things that we hope to accomplish. So with that, and within this strategic plan, I brought a copy. It's a little bit beat up. I've been looking at it a lot lately, but we revamped our mission, our vision, our values, our goals and objectives. And I'll say that last year we had roughly 13,000 calls of people calling 911. So you'll hear when Chief Cartwright talks from PD, we all have our numbers that we throw out, but about 13,000 emergency runs, which equates to about close to 27,000 responses, and that's because sometimes we'll send a fire engine and a ladder truck or a paramedic ambulance, and I can get into why we do those things later. Another 2,900, almost 3,000 lifeguard rescues, and that's not preventative actions. A lot of times those I call them kids because a lot of times they're 16 years old, but those seasonal lifeguards come off the towers and they'll move you out of rip currents, or they'll move you away from the pier, they'll move you away from the rocks. We call those preventatives. When they go out and actually effect a rescue and pull somebody in, we call that a rescue. So about 3,000 of those. And we do not have, when was the last time we had a drowning, Brian? I'm going to defer to you really quick. It's been a couple of years. Which is fascinating because this past 4th of July, we had a lot of people on the beach, and we were trying to figure out exactly what our estimate was going to be, and we come up with about 100,000. Sometimes it's helicopters, sometimes it's drones, sometimes just looking at the crowd, and I said, well, let's talk about this. The Coliseum holds 100,000 people, so if it all emptied out right now from Corona Del Mar all the way up to Huntington Beach, and we said, oh, no, it's actually way more than that. So 100,000 people at the beach and no drownings on a day when it's warm and some decent surf came in. It's pretty impressive to have no drownings. So I commend them for that. Okay, so let's get started here. One thing that Steve didn't mention, if he had my bio, was that I'm part of this program right now up in Monterey, California at the Naval Postgraduate School that's been going on for about a year now. And I'm there with all the federal, the CIA, FBI, Secret Service, DOJ, TSA. It's easy to remember because they're all 3 letters. And then they toss in a couple of 2 police chiefs from around the country and 2 fire chiefs. There's one from New York and I'm from California. And they have a police chief from Akron, Ohio, and another one from Texas. So it's kind of interesting how they built our cohort. We've been together for a year now. And part of it was I had to write a paper on something related to my profession. So I picked value-added services. And one of the things that when I started diving into what is the fire department, if I were to ask any of you what does the fire department do, you'd probably say, you send a fire engine and an ambulance to a medical call, and you take people to the hospital, which we do, or you go to traffic accidents, or you go to fires. But outside of that, I'm not really sure what you guys do. We pay you a lot of money, and what are you doing? So here's what we're doing. So let's get into this. So here in Newport Beach, and I assume around the community, so it's not, or around the country, this is pretty common. Fire departments were born out of a community concept. So we are very engaged in this community. Any of you that have been around this community, you'll see the different parades. We're part of probably a dozen different parades on the 4th of July, but we do a lot of community outreach where we tie it in with things like CERT and our lifeguards, and then our fire personnel, where we go to Station 7 where we do Fire Service Day. We have Public Safety Day where we put the two together with the police. And that's really just kind of the low-hanging fruit of trying to show the public who we are, what we do, and especially the kids really like it. So they get to play with the different things. And you'll see some demonstrations over here where we practice cutting cars apart. That's one of the Public Safety Days where we can show people kind of how we do things and what it looks like with the jaws of life and things like that. CERT, as you well know, took off here in Newport Beach about, I guess, early 2000. So about 2000, I believe it was, maybe 25 years ago. And we built it up into a nationally recognized program here in Newport Beach because we have a very engaged population and our communities. So Matt Brisboy ran it for the better part of a couple of decades. He retired a couple of years ago, and it also was right during COVID, so it went dormant for a little while. We had a lifeguard, Natalie May, pop in for a year to try and just keep people engaged via email, but we couldn't bring anybody out, so it was just kind of floundering, for lack of better words. And now we've promoted Josh Leith, and I don't think Josh is here today because I wanted to introduce him. Is Josh out there anywhere? No? Okay, so Josh is the new CERT coordinator and our PIO, and you'll meet him soon enough because he'll be out in the community. But it's really back in full swing again. We have everybody going through the classes and through the different trainings. So CERT is one of the ways that we're able to stay involved. Incident management teams are something that the fire service stole from the military and really brought to the homeland. So at the local levels, I'll start over here on the top left. So that's the state level, and then over here to the right is the county level, and then bounce down to what I will call the local level. So the way that we work our wildland responses, when you see a fire on the news and it's up in Napa, California, or it's down in San Diego, or it's in San Bernardino, you'll see all these fire engines coming from all over the state. And the way that system works is an incident management team under what we call the Master Mutual Aid, and we're participants of it here in Newport Beach. So that group of fire engines right there in the top left, I don't know what fire that is. Doesn't matter because we went to so many over the last few years, but that's Newport Beach on the left. That's Costa Mesa to the right of it. That's Huntington Beach to the right of it, and then from there, so on and so on. I can't read the rest of them. But they could be as far away as the Oregon border, and we travel together. So we'll take a chief officer, it could be one of the chiefs in the back from Newport Beach, and he'll take 5 fire engines from Orange County, and they'll travel together for hours and hours and hours to get up to this incident, and they'll stay 7 to 10, sometimes up to 14 days. So it's really impressive the way we mobilize all over the state, and we can use resources. So if something happens here in Orange County, what happens is we start pulling quickly. We have a problem, we'll pull Anaheim, we'll pull OCFA, we'll pull Huntington Beach, and then we start asking for quicker help. Hey, LA County, Riverside County, can you get here quickly? And then if we realize it's gonna extend for days or even weeks, we start putting out calls to the other regions throughout the state, and they'll send us equipment, just like we send equipment there. So that piece of it is unlike anything I've ever seen, because I was, I guess, born into the fire service. My dad, I was 6 months old when my dad was hired, so it's all I've kind of known, and to me that's kind of normal that, hey, we're sending units up to Eureka. And I go, well, I don't even know how to get there. I don't know what that means, but I guess I'm going there. So, but it's really kind of cool that we can do that, and we do, and they set up little, the the way they set up these camps and these villages and these showers and food lines and restrooms and places to bed down in tents, really impressive. This over here, this one I'm really proud of, where it says COVID-19 vaccines. When COVID hit and the vaccines arrived, I believe it was December 23rd, 2020, 23rd or 24th, and the state sent the vaccines over to the county healthcare agency, and the county immediately realized, okay, we have a lot of vaccines, and we have 3.2 million people in Orange County, and we don't really know how to distribute all this. We don't have the personnel to do so. So they picked up the phone, and they called the fire services, the fire chiefs and the EMS managers, and said, can you help us, or can you come up with a plan? And we said, yeah, that's exactly what we do. Looking over to the left, we can send units all the way up to Northern California. We can get vaccines out. So we started putting together a plan where we opened up, on the short term, little local, what we call pods, the points of distribution, in Huntington Beach, in Anaheim, and in Irvine, where we started vaccinating each other and training. So we got out in front of it by a couple of months, and we got some variations to our paramedic protocols where we could give vaccinations, because that's not typically something we learn in paramedic school. That's you take your kids to a pediatrician to get vaccinations, right? So now here we are, we're paramedics, and not that it's any different than drawing up a medication and sticking a needle in somebody's arm, but there is always training to new things. So here we are. These are lifeguards stabbing each other, and I don't know if that's a real vaccine or if that was a fake photo, but there's a needle in that guy's arm, Andy White. So he got his vaccine, and we vaccinated each other, and this was really fascinating behind the scenes how this all happened. We vaccinated each other, but we were also practicing at the same time. So as soon as they said, okay, you can do healthcare personnel, you could do nurses, you could do physical therapists, and you can do elderly people. And I can't remember the exact age, Kristen, if we started at 75 or older or 65 or older, but we started with elderly. We started bringing people into these little places in Huntington Beach. I remember the line around the corner. And we started just expanding from there. Then we started getting into the bigger pods. You remember the Disneyland one and the Orange County Fairgrounds and just the various logistics that went into how are we going to do this? How are we going to staff this? So we got paramedics to go do that, to run the kind of the incident management piece of it. And that's what they're doing up here. There's Chief Carr and Chief Puhek and a couple of our paramedics. They put those vests on. They ran it. They kind of operated it until we sort of handed it off to the county once they could get more robust and get more nurses and doctors and volunteers, really. So then once we got all the different systems up and running from the different pods around the county, then we partnered with them where we were still there by their side, but realistically, the county just wasn't prepared to take that big of a project on at that time. So the fire service stepped in because, quite frankly, that's what we do. So our incident management team, like from who do you call when all is going poorly? You call the military because they'll come in and build something or run something or protect something. We're kind of in that same realm on the way we think and the way we handle things. Okay, so another thing I want to talk about, and we can go down some rabbit holes here. So what I'm going to do, John, is I'm going to give a brief overview, and then some of them, if you have questions later, you would want to talk about it, we can do that. But I want to hit some highlights on some of the things that we're working on here in Newport Beach as far as community risk reduction and how we're affecting some change or trying to make things a little bit more manageable. The first thing is this Fire Safe Council. You see the logo right there. John is a board member or chairman or? Board member. Okay. Board member. This was brought up because we were, yes, James? Oh, and Dennis. Okay, I didn't even see that. So we have a few here. Okay, so you guys stacked the audience, so hopefully I know what I'm talking about. Now I just got nervous. Okay, so the Fire Safe Council, anyone who's lived in California the last few years or all of your life, you know that our propensity to burn has really been increasing over the last maybe 5 to 8 years. It seems like you turn on the news now and there's wildfires burning all over the place, and we're shuttling these fire engines up and down the state. And if it seems like that's true to you, it's because it is true. So I was hired in 1994, and wow, it was almost 30 years ago. We used to go to 1 or 2 of those a year, and there were actually gaps. I remember gaps from maybe 06 to about 010 where we really kind of just didn't go anywhere. It just wasn't really happening. And then all of a sudden, it just proliferated, and now it's just the new norm. So I'll get into some of our equipment later and how we're adjusting here in town, but those fires are burning. And because they're burning, it got the attention of the insurance companies. So the insurance companies weren't real big on that because they like to make money, not lose money. So they started dropping people. And at the very least, they weren't adding any new. And a lot of them are still in that realm where they aren't adding new. So if you have a home in what the state considers a high fire hazard zone, they may not give you fire insurance. Worse yet, if you already have insurance, they may drop you, or they may double it or triple it or quadruple it. So it really became a problem. And it wasn't specific to Newport Beach. It wasn't specific to any one area. It was a problem that we were seeing all over the state. So we started working with the insurance commissioner up in the state of California. We started working with the different insurance companies, but they're private business at the end of the day. So I'm a fire chief. I can't go tell State Farm or Farmers or Allstate, hey, you need to insure my homeowners. And they, it just doesn't work that way, obviously. So the insurance commissioner got involved, and then the state created some other options for people to get fire insurance. So raise your hand if this has affected you in any way, shape, or form, the fire insurance piece. Okay, so several people. So then the state got involved, and they offered some fire insurance that people could buy, but it was a lesser insurance for a lot higher price. Then we started this Fire Safe Council, which was a concept that was taking shape all over the state, where you can bring together different homeowners associations, and you can utilize a little more, leverage some power, if you will, with state legislatures, with the insurance companies and things like that. And I'll let either Dennis or John speak to that if you guys want when we're done here. Steve said I only have 2 more hours, so I'll keep talking fast. Homelessness, again, it's happening all over the nation. It's happening here in California, and it's happening here in Newport Beach. We're trying to get our arms around it, and I will tell you, I'm kind of a self-proclaimed sort of a local government geek, and I watch other cities. I live in Huntington Beach, but I watch legislation up and down the state, and the things that Newport Beach has been doing to resolve homelessness are really, really astounding. The fact that we were able to put that ordinance together a couple of weeks ago is the backstory of years and years of work, of other things, of getting the permanent supportive housing, getting the Be Well program, and getting a lot of other things in place so that we could get there. There's a lot of cities that are way behind us on that. So I'm really proud of that, and that's just a complete 360 partnership, starting with the council's lead to Grace and the city manager's office. And where'd Natalie go? I saw Natalie walk in earlier. Natalie taking the charge with our homeless liaison from, she was a librarian. She started in the library, and now she's out there helping homeless every day. So, I mean, what she does is like really the Lord's work. She works with a designated homeless liaison from the police department, but we have a multi-pronged approach that we've been working really hard on. And I'll just say really quick, where fire fits into that is, here's how the system used to work, and still kind of does when it's broken on a daily basis. A homeless person could be on the side of the road, and they look like they're in some sort of medical distress or intoxicated or what have you. And somebody will call 911, and a police officer and paramedics will show up, and we're trying to decide what to do with this person. How do we help them? Well, they don't really have a medical issue. They don't really want to go to the hospital. But they haven't really committed a crime, so you can't put them in jail. So we're sort of go around in this circle, and we say, well, we can get you cleaned up and we can get you some food at Hogue, but that's not fair to Hogue. We're taking them up to Hogue. and Hogue cleans them up, takes their vital signs, says, they don't really have anything wrong with them. They kick them back out onto the street. And we can't violate their personal rights and just take them to jail either. So we're sort of handcuffed. So a lot of times they end up in the back of an ambulance. So our paramedics are being tied up, and they're at Hogue, and now we're putting another person in an emergency room that doesn't really need to be an emergency room. You guys have probably heard this story, but it probably bears hearing it from me that this is real life. This is how it's happening. And that same person could come back out, walk 2 miles down the street 3 hours later, and somebody calls 911 again because they laid down the grass, and here we are again. So it just is, rinse and repeat. So we're working on how to get through things like that. And I'll talk a little bit about this community paramedicine piece here in a couple of slides and how that ties in with homelessness and how I think that's going to help as well from the permanent supportive housing and from the Be Well aspect and from the ordinance and some of the other issues that we're working on. Really cool stuff. I'm really excited about it because I see it working, and it's one of those things where you don't approach, there's not an overnight solution. We say this all the time, but it really isn't. It's a lot of work, it's a lot of innovation, it's a lot of risk taking, it's a lot of frustration, it's a lot of money, but it takes a month, 6 months, a year, 2 years, and suddenly it's one of those things where you kind of have to step back and look at it and celebrate the small victories and go, it took a while, but it's working. So, if you have an issue around you that you are locked on and you don't see it working, hopefully we'll get there, but hopefully some of you see that it is lessening and it is getting better. Sidewalk CPR, Stop the Bleed, these are things that we go out and we teach the community, and once again, I think I'll get to it here in a second with community paramedicine, but our cardiac save rates here in Newport Beach are twice, Kristen, 2.5 times the national and county average. We just had a cardiac arrest on 4th of July, 20-year-old that was body surfing that was pulled out of the water by lifeguards. They started CPR, paramedics arrived on scene, and we were able to get pulses back and get the heart rate back. And that's a 20-year-old that in a lot of situations would not have made it. And that is a tragedy. Anybody dying is a tragedy. But a 20-year-old on the 4th of July going and body surfing, shouldn't be their last day of life. But here in Newport, we have lifeguards that know what they're doing. They're quick, they recognize things, and the whole system comes together here. That lifeguard brings them out, the paramedics show up on scene. I actually made a phone call to police that day, and the police, because Balboa Boulevard was absolutely jam-packed, and we had CHP, we had Irvine, we had Newport Police, we had all kinds of police from other agencies. They blocked the boulevard so that our paramedics could get up to Hogue. And then Hogue is a world-class hospital as it is too, so we're lucky to have them in our backyard. So these things come in on alignment. But part of it is this sidewalk CPR concept is we feel and studies show that the brain can only go 4 to 6 minutes without oxygen. So if you're not breathing or you're in cardiac arrest, you only have a small window. And somebody has to recognize it, call 911, we have to get the call, and we have to get there. So your window is closing pretty quickly. If anyone in this room starts doing some form of CPR, you've increased that person's chance of survival tremendously. So whether it's a stranger and you do hands-only CPR, or if it's a loved one and you want to do the full CPR, that's your choice. But doing something helps greatly. We have that proven. And part of it is we think that it's a very well-trained community, if you will. The amount of times we hear over the radio CPR in progress is amazing, and that gives us hope because, okay, when we get there, there's going to be some viability. Stop the bleed, these are things that are real easy techniques. You learn in CERT, but we also teach layperson stop the bleed if needed. SALT, this is one of the only ones in the country, Brian, I would think, our lifeguard chief, I'm looking over at Brian. Surfer Awareness Life-Saving Techniques, I put it in parentheses so I wouldn't forget the acronym. But what they do is our lifeguards will go out and they'll teach the local high school surf classes, Newport Harbor surf class, CDM surf class, OCC surf class, and they teach them basic awareness of if you're out surfing and you see somebody or another surfer or your friend that you're surfing with or whatever, something goes wrong, we're teaching local surfers to help local surfers. So if a local surfer, if two kids are surfing and one, has a C-spine injury or drowns or something goes wrong, hopefully his friend knows what to do is pull him up, then call Lifeguard, we'll call paramedics, and then the whole system starts to work. But if everybody just stands around and watches like they do in New York, you've seen the videos where they walk around you, that's not good. So we have a different program here with our community. Fall prevention, drowning prevention. I'm going to lob a softball here because it says it. 80% of our calls are EMS related. What do you think is the number one cause of the EMS call? Somebody says stub toes. Falls. Falls are the number one. So, that comes in a lot of different forms. That could come from a kid falling on a bike or a skateboard, but largely it's generated from our care facilities and elderly generation where people fall. They trip over their dog. They trip over cracks. They trip just because they had a syncopal episode and they got dizzy, or just because. So fall prevention, a lot of the things that our EMS division will do is they'll go out and they'll train some of the care facilities on different ways they can configure their care facility and how to prevent falls and things like that. And then beach safety. I put that in there because we do have Brian here, our lifeguard chief. Okay, there's a couple more things I want to get through because, Steve, how much time do I get for, is it 8:30 is over? Oh, okay, I'm going to go faster then. I'm going to talk about some of the, human trafficking and active shooter are some other things that we're working on. Today is the 187th day in the year, I think. There's been 415 mass shootings in the United States so far this year, which is an average of 2.23 shootings per day. 541 people have been killed with another, read my notes here, 1,653 wounded. So the worst one so far to date was the Monterey Park one, where there were 12 people killed. Now, interestingly enough, those seem like big numbers. Back in 1983, we have no reported mass shootings. So it's not that long ago when this wasn't an issue, and now it is. So the reason I bring that up is in 1999, when the Columbine shooting happened, that changed the game. That was, you may remember, Dylan Klebold and the other kid. They go into Columbine, they shoot up the school, and that got our attention of an active shooter type of situation. Although at the time, fire departments would wait down the street or stage away in safety, and police officers would kind of assess the situation as well, and they were slow to move in. Then that took us through a series of other active shooters to Sandy Hook. Sandy Hook changed the game again because now you have kids, and kids were killed there. There were 26 people killed that day. 20 of them were under the age of 10, might even been under the age of 6. They were little kids. And people don't like, I say people, myself included, we don't like to see kids laying there injured and not do anything about it. So the fire service changed the way they approach it. So now now we train side by side with PD, and we have what we call field force protection and entry crews. And PD, they send a couple of people in to go neutralize the shooter, find them, and do whatever it is, apprehend them or stop them, however they have to. And fire crews and paramedics will go in with other police. And if there are people bleeding, injured, shot, we start pulling them out in real time. So it's a coordinated effort. We've done over 8 active shooter drills throughout the county. Newport has, just in this past year. Then there's Uvalde. You probably remember Uvalde. They digressed. They went backwards. So somebody's in there, and they're not affecting the rescue. People expect us to affect a rescue now. So we do. And we're prepared for that in a lot of different ways, which is kind of an interesting change that people probably aren't aware of that we're doing, that I just want you to be aware of, that should it happen here in Newport, I believe we're really prepared. I'm going to jump back over to human trafficking. We've been doing this county-wide training here in Orange County with Newport Beach took the lead with Chief Thompson, and she asked me from the county fire chiefs to take the lead. And look at this human trafficking issue. I put a stat up here. 350 trafficked victims were helped in Orange County in 2019 and 20. It's estimated that nearly 80% of human trafficking in some way, shape, or form runs through Orange County at some point. So whether it happens in Orange County, it comes into LAX, or comes into John Wayne, or because of the wealth, because of the money, a lot of it, I will admit, is focused up in the north end towards like the Disneyland area, Ball Street, and Catella and places like that. We know where the hot spots are, but we have a lot of fusion centers, a lot of law enforcement agencies that tie in with local fire departments, because what we found is that the traffic victims are afraid of law enforcement because their trafficker doesn't want them talking to law enforcement for obvious reasons. But if they're injured, or if they passed out, or if they're sick or something's wrong, we're still a trusted entity. They'll let a paramedic talk to them. So what we've come to identify, and we're training paramedics, is to recognize signs of these traffic victims. And we may not do anything at that time. We may just treat and release. We may take them to a hospital. But it's enough for us. We've interviewed different traffic victims. If you've been through Leadership Tomorrow and you've heard some of these stories, they'll tell you that nobody ever asked. I couldn't say anything, but no one asked. So that's where a paramedic can really start affecting some change. We're really proud of that. I'm going fast, Steve. Community paramedicine, that started here in 1970 with the Wedgwood-Townsend Act. I don't have anything to give. I don't have any cool treats. I have some Altoids back here. But if anybody gets this right, who signed the Wedgwood-Townsend Act in 1970, Governor of California? Ronald Reagan. Where was that? Who knew that? Oh, she's already heard my speech. So it was Ronald Reagan. I'm really proud of that. That's pretty cool stuff. Ronald Reagan signed the Wedgwood-Townsend Act, which started up the paramedic program here in California. Newport Beach jumped on board in 1975, and we've been providing paramedic services. These AB 1544 and AB 1767 are community paramedicine legislation at the state level that we've been working really hard on from the fire service side to effect some change. So now that a homeless person who may need mental health services doesn't have to go to Hoag. You break an arm and maybe you don't need an emergency room, you can go to an urgent care, or other situations where we don't. Right now, we're legislatively tied to an emergency room. A paramedic has to take you to an emergency room. We're trying to change that. It's called alternate destination, and we can make some decisions in the field as to where to take you and the most appropriate places. So those are things I think will also help homelessness, but also help unclog some of the ERs with basic broken arms and things like that. And then lastly, the opioid awareness training. So this is my last slide, by the way. The fire department and the police department have accepted grants in conjunction with the state, and we're getting Narcan, and we're rolling out training to all city employees beginning next week. Then we're going to be moving towards the schools, the staff, the teachers. We've done a couple of the different yacht clubs. We want to do, Grace would like us to do restaurants, bars, just get Narcan out in the community. Fentanyl has been a problem. So, I don't think I need to tell you that. Coastal zip codes, Newport Beach being some of them, have seen a 34% increase in 1920, and the national average is a 20% increase. So it's on the rise. 78% are considered poisonings, and they're calling them overdoses right now. But we're looking at changing that messaging to poisoning, because a lot of them are counterfeit, a lot of them are taken by accident, a lot of them are laced. People don't necessarily, an overdose to me is somebody that intentionally opened a bottle and they overdosed and they had a different plan in mind. A lot of these are just unintentional, so it's basically a poisoning if you want to look at it that way. We lump them all as overdoses right now. We've had an average of 130 overdoses in the last 2 years here in Newport, and 12 of those overdoses were under the age of 18, and 40 of them in 19 to 25-year-olds since January. So it's happening here in various pockets and in various ways. And the best we could do right now is keep the education going, understand that it's out there, understand that it's happening, and get that Narcan out there. And I guess I'll just stop there because I could probably talk for a long time, but I assume there's a couple questions.
Yeah, but maybe 3,
You didn't tell me it was 8:30. I thought you said 9:30.
It's got to be somewhere at 9, so BS. Anybody have a quick question? Nancy Scarborough.
Nancy?
Can you give us an update on the junior lifeguard building? I know that got.
Yes, so I didn't hit on those. We have 1,416 kids in the junior lifeguard program this year, which is the equivalent of about 3 of our elementary schools. So what we do there as far as keeping that many kids safe and occupied and trained is pretty impressive. The building, I just heard it on 4th of July. I heard 3 different rumors. It was the rain, it was this, it was that, it was the other. The real story is there was rain when they poured the concrete. There was some spalling on the concrete, cracking, and just kind of it wasn't very well done. So Dave Webb, the Public Works Director, said that this doesn't look good, and the contractor wanted to just make it right. So he called in the Calvary. He brought in some council members and Grace, and they went and paid a visit, and they said, no, this is not the work we want done. So they went back to the contractor and said, stop work, put a fence around it for the summer so we could utilize the parking, and there's not construction while people are down there. And we're going to resume after Labor Day and get it right and open it up next summer. So, I mean, the short story is it wasn't a good concrete pour, and we don't want to live with that building for 50 years because it wasn't poured right. So we just decided just give it a few months and let's get through the summer, and I don't know how if they're gonna tear it down and rebuild it or if they just redo sections. That part I don't know, but it's on hold.
Well, thank you,
Yep.
Chief.
All right. Well, thank you for coming. I'm sorry I wasn't funnier and I didn't talk faster and I ran late, but it is what it is. Hopefully you take away from that we're doing a little more than just waiting for the next call. Brian is running out. Remember, it is Bren Carlson Day today, so he has to go do his first event. I appreciate everybody for coming. Steve?
Yep. Thank you. That was an excellent presentation as always. Thank you, Chief. One more round of applause for the Chief and his staff that's here today. Thank you. Just quickly, I know you guys want to get out of here. Make sure, one thing I did forget, I want to thank Sabrina Holmstrom with Wells Fargo Bank. They were our sponsors this morning. And Ivan as well with her. Thank you. We have a lot of great events coming up, so if you want to, come down to a chamber event in the next month or so, this is what we've got going on. If you're a young professional, our Navigate group is meeting on July 12th at Billy's from 6 to 8, and there's going to be a Mai Tai challenge, so bring your game, okay? Our next Fire It Up Friday, who's a cigar smoker in the audience? Any cigar smokers? Okay, that doesn't matter. Okay, we got one. Fire It Up Friday on our patio on July 14th from 4 to 6 will be cigar smoking, so if you're offended by cigar smoke, do not show up for that event. I think it's the 87th flight of Newport is going to happen in the harbor on July 16th. It's the lasers and the Harbor 20s and what's the other one? You know. He doesn't know. Okay. That's okay. Well, they're going to be 87th year in a row. It's, I think, one of the longest running sailboat races in the West Coast. State of the County, this is going to be a big one. We have a new event this year, our inaugural State of the County Luncheon. It's going to happen at the Balboa Bay Resort on July 19th from 11:30 to 1:30. The event is really virtually sold out at this point. I actually have more reservations than we're going to have seats. I'm hoping that some of the table sponsors don't use them all so that we can backfill those and maybe sell a few more tickets. But if you're interested in going to that, it's July 19th. We have County Board Chair Supervisor Don Wagner is the speaker, Katrina Foley, 5th District Supervisor speaker, and County CEO Frank Kim are all be speaking there. So it's going to be a great event. And hope to see you there. Our Government Affairs Committee meeting, our speaker is Bob Stein. He's kind of the water quality guru at the city. He's been there forever. He's going to be talking about a few things going on, including the newly approved water wheel project that's going to go in the Upper Bay, so that'll be interesting. That's on July 20th from 8 to 9:30. Our Sunset Mixer this month is at 5 Crowns, July 27th. Our next Wake Up Newport meeting is August 3rd, Congresswoman Katie Porter promises she'll be here this time. She's supposed to be here in June. This is July. June, she was supposed to be here, but she had to go back to Washington to vote on the debt ceiling limit, which she voted against. So too bad she went. But we can ask her about that next month. And then September 14th, I'll just mention that. If you didn't get enough of the fire talk this morning, and you want to support the fire department, our annual Fire and Lifeguard dinner will be held at the Hyatt September 14th. It's not on our website yet, but it will be pretty soon. And all these events can be found at newportbeach.com. Thank you all for coming. If you're not a member of the Chamber of Commerce, you should be, and we'll see you soon. Take care.